Good morning. My name is Fiona Cottam and I'm the principal at Heartland International School in Dubai. I'm delighted to be here today as the host for our second panel of the Schools and Nursery Show, and how wonderful it is to actually be here in person again this year. Wonderful event taking place downstairs, but our panel discussions hopefully will give you who can't join us this morning perhaps some live information as we're actually here in process, or indeed give you an opportunity to be able to look up some of these talks and podcasts later on after the event when you're pondering some of the decisions that you might need to make. This morning's panel is made up of a team of experts who are really going to be able to guide us on one of the big challenging questions that's faced us here in Dubai over the last few months, and that is the announcement about the change to school entry age. So the topic for this morning is changes to the start age for school in our FS and KG worlds, the right time to start school, just what it is. And I'm delighted this morning that, first of all, I'm joined by Peter Sturgis, who is Head of Primary from Emirates International School, Jumeirah, Amina Evans, who I'm grateful to work with from Heartland International School, who sits on the leadership team and is Head of Foundation Stage, and Danielle Davis, who joins us from the Capital School here in Dubai also. So welcome to all of you. A really big burning question for parents, isn't it? You know, how do you know when is the right time for your child to start school? Is it about age? Is it about when they're ready? Talk to us through the differences, not just in your school, but generally, and your views. So you're the experts. Peter, if we start with you.
Yes, certainly. And I've sort of got a bit of experience of this. My little girl is currently in early years 2, and she joined my current school in early years 1 when she had just turned 3. Now it's interesting because I was talking to my wife about this last night, and we were saying she'd had 12 months where she hadn't had any formal education whatsoever. She hadn't been in the setting. She had been previously from 18 months through till about 2 years old, and then that gap between sort of 2 and 3, she hadn't been in formal school. She'd essentially been at home with our nanny. She came into school and she was confident and eager and bright, but other children of a similar age were less so. So my own personal view is it's not about age. It is very much about readiness and experience at home and prior experiences very much in terms of whether that child's going to be ready or not.
Yeah. But there have been specific regulatory changes this year, which does make life a little bit different. I mean, would you mind just teasing those out for parents? Because I think that, you know, there is a little bit of confusion because it's changed since it's ever been before.
And it's, you know, it's really interesting because for KHT to make the regulation ruling, so from September, the children starting Foundation Stage 1, so they have to be 3 by the 31st of August to start the academic year. Okay. So they have to already be 3. So previously with KHDA, they could be turning 3 up until the end of December. So you have those children who are 2 years, 10 months coming into school, which it does depend on the child. And I know for us as a school, when we do our play observations, we look at every child as an individual. And I think that's so important. So you do have children that you feel are ready. And for us, when we look at those children, the things that we look for are that personal side, the social and emotional, as well as the physical, because you know with the gross motor and the fine motor, that will help with the writing and help with the reading. So we look at all those aspects, and then we talk to parents about whether we feel the child is ready to start school.
Danielle, how has it affected your school? I mean, has it made a huge difference? Are parents anxious and worried about this age change?
Yeah, I think so. And more often than not, I think the parents are kind of coming in and saying, my child's going to lose out on a year of their education. And that's the mindset that we're experiencing. And it's not always about kind of losing that year of education. It is about, is that child ready? Is it fair to put them into an FS setting at the moment? Do they need to spend another year consolidating the listening skills, the personal skills, the physical development, so that when they come to school, they're ready and they can thrive, rather than having a year of a bit of a struggle sometimes because they're not ready and they need to be at home with mum or dad or with a nanny for an extra sort of 12 months so that then they can have the best start to their education. But there is a lot of anxiety about it, and I think it's a bit of confusion on some parents' perspectives because why the change now? Why have KHDA decided to do it now? And is it because of the pandemic? Is it because they've realised actually some 2-year-olds are not ready to start FS1 and they need a little bit more time to be nurtured at home? But yeah, we're just trying to put parents' sort of minds at ease as much as possible and taking each case as it comes.
Peter, do you think the change is a good thing?
It's an interesting question. I think probably on balance, yes, I do think it's the right thing. I mean, last year we did see, and the previous year I did see a number of children coming in at 2 years and 10 months whose parents were quite desperate to get them in through the doors, and they weren't ready for school whatsoever. And we had to have some quite gentle conversations with parents and say, actually, at the moment it isn't looking like it's working. And some parents get quite upset and worked up about that. I guess they've spent a long time planning for their child to join school, and to see those plans sort of thrown up in the air again can be quite difficult. But as we've said already, there are some children who at 2 years, 10 months breeze to the doors, they're confident, they're eager, and off they go. But I do think probably certainly from our settings perspective, yes, possibly it is the right decision in terms of that readiness, making sure that when children come in, they're going to be successful, and that's ultimately what we want. And
I think if I put my parents' hat on, although my son is 19, so I don't have to worry about this, there is that worry. Are they at the same stage as every other child? And we do compare, even though we shouldn't compare as parents, we tend to compare. How can we reassure those parents, perhaps, who are anxious that their child, they feel even in their heart and soul, their child isn't ready? How do we reassure them that it's okay? How do we have those discussions, Amina?
I think it's important to be honest with parents as well, and to know that a child is succeeding in different areas. So within our curriculum, the earliest foundation stage curriculum, it's very clear and it's broken down to ages, and those ages overlap actually. So you may have some ages and stages the child's working successfully on and is ready. For example, it could be in the gross motor movement, they can use a bike, they can go upstairs. However, within the communication language, are still building sentences, they're using the attentive listening, so they're not at the age-related expectation for that as well, and that's okay, because children do make different rates of progress at different times, and for parents to know that, I think, is really important, and actually to celebrate their achievements is really, really important, I think, for parents to know.
I think, Danielle, you picked up on that, didn't you, that for some children it's just not the right time. What about, though, that, the opposite of that, as Peter has just described, a parent whose child is ready and they're so hungry and they're so eager to come to school, and now with the changes they can't actually, can they?
That's right.
What would you recommend parents do in the meantime, as it were?
Yeah, I think it works both ways. If your child is ready or if they're not quite ready, as a parent, have conversations with professionals. I'm more than happy to speak to parents who come through our door and do an assessment of their child. And if their child is 2 years, 10 months and unfortunately can't start this year, I can still kind of recommend things that they can spend the next 12 months doing, so that when they do come, they haven't missed out on a year of education. They've been educated at home, and parents are the children's first educators. So, as long as they're doing the right things, their child will be even more ready than they would have been previously at 2 years and 10 months. And the same, if your child is of the correct age and they come to a school and perhaps have a professional dialogue, and that honesty is really, really important. I agree with you, Amina, about the readiness of their child. And perhaps your child is old enough, but they're not ready. And again, it's having that dialogue with a professional. You can go away and work on listening skills, following instructions, get outside to the park, go swimming, develop all of those skills that your child needs before they're put into a setting where perhaps they may feel like they are struggling a little bit. So yeah, as parents, I think first educators and training yourself and giving yourself the skills that you need to make sure that your child has the best start to their education, whether that's at home or in a foundation stage setting.
I'm glad you touched on some of those examples, because one of the things you said is, it isn't a waste of a year, but it is about parents doing the right things. And that, of course, is teacher speak. So could you give us an example, just from your experience, what are the right things? What advice can we give to parents about how they can just help their child to continue and grow and develop at home, but by doing some of the right things, as you say?
You already used some really good examples, didn't you, of getting out into the environment, taking your child shopping, giving them opportunities to experience real life. And one of the things we always talk to our parents about when they ask about what can we do to help at home is read. Read with your child, read to them, read with them as much as you possibly can. I don't think there's anything more important than that, whether you're school age or not school age. And ultimately, that's an incredibly important tool that ultimately will lead to success later on. But I think it is very much about getting out into the environment, visiting the park, experiencing wildlife, obviously physical activity, making sure you're taking your child for regular walks and swims and all the wonderful things that are an opportunity in Dubai.
And they don't have to cost money, do they?
Absolutely
not.
not.
We're lucky to live in the city that we live in, that so much is on our doorstep, through the parks, as you say, through the beaches, etc., that we can access completely free, which is great.
But those speaking and listening skills as well, and taking time to be with your child. I mean, it's not easy as parents. We're all incredibly busy, aren't we? And finding that time to actually have quality time just to sit down and talk with your child, or if you're even in the car, just noticing things and talking about things is really important from what I see, without a doubt. And I think we're all sort of guilty at that at times, of not spending enough time with our children, spending that time just talking with them and listening to them as well.
I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot here because, you know, we're working mothers, aren't we? I don't know about you, Danielle, but I know that Amina is, and certainly I was the whole time my son was little. So it's easy to say, do the right things, but I had somebody else taking care of my child during the day because I was at work. Are there any pointers that you could give that, you know, particularly for working mums, working families where both parents are working, how they can sort of enhance the environment to make sure that their child still continues to learn and grow, even though mum or dad aren't there during the day?
For me, the biggest skill is independence. And I know from being a mum of 3 children to build the independence with your child. So even when a child wakes up, ask them to choose what clothes they want to wear. You know, can they pick out the shorts and the t-shirts? You know, and it may be a mixed match of different things, but that's okay. And to celebrate that. Going down for breakfast, you know, for them to get the bowl and spoon out to pour their own breakfast. There's so many skills in that are involved in that, and actually involves the child being an independent learner is really crucial. And again, you know, some of the things that parents can do to support at home is think about those activities that they can do and they can provide. One of the things that I think is quite an easy suggestion for parents who are maybe working is having 3 or 4 different boxes of activities that are set and ready. So you can prepare that in the evening. It could be a Play-Doh box with different resources, could be a colouring box, it could be a construction box. It could be a small puppet box, and then throughout the day your home help or whoever's with your child can then select different boxes, and your child can be independent and select their boxes and actually build that learning. And then when you get home, you can talk about what you did today. You can reenact those stories that you did, and I think it's about sharing as well. And we're great that we've got technology. So, you know I get lots of photos and videos from home, so sharing that. And when you get home, watch those videos together with your child and say, that was fantastic, that model you made. What was it? Was it the Burj Khalifa? Are you taller than the Burj Khalifa? You know, so building that language and discussion with your child is really important.
You know, it's funny, and I think as working parents, we often do feel guilt, don't we? Whether we're mums or dads, we often feel guilt. And I suppose I come from a generation where I didn't have the luxury of preschool. You just went to school when you were ready. Are we worrying too much about this, do you think, Danielle? You know, is there too much stress? Do we put too much pressure on parents to worry about this?
I think sometimes there is a danger of that, and just do the simple things. Enjoy family time, like go to the beach, go out to the parks, get outside, but also within the house. If you're making a meal, involve your child in it. Come and chop this cucumber for me. Let's mix this together. What do you think will happen when we put the flour in? And have those dialogues with the child within a normal family life. It doesn't have to be recreating school at home. Just involve your child in what you're doing. And more often than not, things take a little bit longer, but that's just something that perhaps you can facilitate and manage within your house, whether it's with home help, whether it's sort of a dad shift and a mum shift, or older brothers and sisters, and really promote that communication and language around your child, so that they know exactly what's going on, they know why you're doing things, and they're learning all of the time. They're like little sponges. And just drawing back on what Amina was saying about independence, is one of the biggest things that we have conversations about in foundation stage. So if you know your child can put on their socks, for example, spare that extra 5 minutes in the morning and give them that chance to put on their socks themselves, rather than thinking, this is easier, I'll just do it myself. Because what are we teaching our child by doing things for them? So little things like that. If you know your child can achieve it by themselves and they can be independent, make sure that they do that every single day.
I'm sitting here feeling incredibly guilty because, of course, I was that parent who cut the straight line and the scissors and drew the straight line and said, no, that's crooked, and I had to fix it. We do worry about those things, and yet there are educational systems and parts of the world where children don't start school till they're 5 or 6. I mean, are we actually putting them into school too young? Just a controversial question to throw out there, Peter.
I don't think so necessarily. I think providing the setting is right and it's supportive and it's safe and it's a welcoming, nurturing environment, then there's absolutely no reason why children can't come in at the age that they do in our schools, without a doubt. But it does depend on the learning environment that you create, doesn't it?
I'm not trying to do this out of enrolments, any of us. I'm just sort of posing that question, because there is a marked difference, isn't there, around the world?
Definitely so. But I think it is about that. It's that nurturing approach, that safe, supportive environment. Children coming in at such an age, before you start to even think about the learning environment and the learning that's going on, it's about making sure they feel cared for and safe and supported. And you get that right, and children will come and thrive.
I mean, I'm speaking to three professionals, of course, who are in mainstream schools, because one of the other challenges and concerns that parents often have is, when is the right time, for example, to move from nursery to school? And I'm not in any way trying to get us to say that schools are best and nurseries aren't, because I think we're, again, blessed with the wonderful nurseries that we have in the city, and we have great partnership with our nursery providers. But how do you know, Amina? How would you advise a parent on when to make that leap, when to make that jump from a nursery environment to a school setting?
I was having that same conversation before I came up here, Fiona, and it's about the individual child and what's best for them. And I always say to parents, come and have a look at a school environment, because for them, I think parents think of school when they were young. Yeah. And that's very different to school now. And school for us...
Thank goodness for that, by the way. Thank goodness.
And for us, school is that home from home, that real nurturing environment that isn't dissimilar from nurseries. And just talking about the differences. And I think as a parent, and I talk to parents talking about the things they like about the nursery, things they like about the school, and what's best for their child. And I think that's important. And actually to have a list of both those things. Some of the things that parents say to me is, will they miss out if they haven't been at school for FS1 and they start in FS2? Not at all, because they've been in a high quality environment in a nursery setting. They're going to be joining. We can support with those transition. We have children coming from all around the world in different settings, and those children integrate really well, and we support them. And I think if a child's ready in their own self, then you'll know as a parent. And if they're seeking for more, then you know that as a parent. Is it more convenient for you as a parent? Will it give you better quality family life? So it's looking at the whole package that works well for you. Have you got friends who there can help, or do they know children, local community? Will that build those friendships? Will it support you? There's lots of different reasons why parents move from nursery to school in that foundation stage point, but it's got to work for you as a whole family. But I do think parents feel that their child's going to miss out, that they're not going to build that academic side, and that's one of the things that we work in partnership with nurseries to ensure that we're in a balance, that we know that high quality providers there, and when the children do come to us, they're at a par with our current children.
That's great. Daniel, any thoughts on that before we take some questions from our audience? About that guilt factor that we do feel, as you say, of parents. Are they missing out on academics? They're not really, are they? I mean,
I completely agree with what you're saying, but also the environment needs to be right. This is what we're considering it.
Walk through the building, go to the classrooms, meet the teachers, and see what feeling you get. I'm not a parent, but I imagine that if I was, I would follow my sort of gut feeling. And you'll know as a parent, if you go into a classroom, whether your child will thrive there or not so much. And if you need to stay in a nursery for a little bit longer, and that's the right decision for your family and for your child, then that makes complete sense. I think within an FS1 setting, it can be beneficial in terms of sort of the staff that are available. They get to know those children very, very well. So the transition may be a little bit smoother to FS2, but that's not to say that a child coming from a nursery isn't going to have a smooth transition, or a child moving from a different country is not going to have a smooth transition, because children, they adapt very, very quickly. Depending on whether they've been in that safe, nurturing environment.
I'm just looking to see if there are any questions coming through, and anything coming through from people at the moment. There don't seem to be, and I think that's probably an indication, of the quality of the guidance that we're sort of going through this morning, but also it's wonderful to see so many people downstairs, isn't it? It's incredible, because we've spent so long apart and we weren't sure, will people actually come in today? And it's wonderful to see. Some of the key questions perhaps that you think are those burning questions, or that parents may come with today that we haven't touched on, Peter. Is there anything that we should, be pointing parents in the direction of, advice or guidance we could give them? Or what are some of those questions that perhaps I, as a more of a secondary specialist, just haven't thought through, that parents might be concerned about?
I think we've covered a lot of the things this morning already, but I do think it comes back down to, as a parent coming in, I think it's what you said, Danielle, about making sure that as a parent, you know that environment, don't you? When you walk through the door, it's that feeling that you get, and going in, and I think trusting your instincts, obviously listening to professionals, but trusting your instincts, and you know your child better than anybody. I always say to parents who come into our school, as you said, parents are the first educators. We are privileged to have the opportunity to work with them during the day, but you know your child, and you know how they will respond, how they will react, and it's about making sure that when you put your child into that environment, that you trust the people they're going to be working with, you trust those professionals.
It's interesting. There's a question that's come in, and believe it or not, it's linked to the previous discussion that we had this morning. You know, we're a British curriculum school at Heartland. You're
International
Baccalaureate school, and you're British curriculum also. You know, what about a parent who thinks, okay, my child is ready to start school, particularly at that very young age? How do I make a decision about what curriculum model to put them into? I've just moved here from, I don't know, let's just say, for want of purposes, I've moved here from Australia. You know, how do I make a decision? Because we haven't got the Australian curriculum school. What do I do? I'll start with you, Danielle, rather than always leaving you to last, so you can maybe get all the good answers in first before everybody else steals the ideas.
I think it's down to personal preference and what your sort of long-term goals are for your child. And I think perhaps if you don't have, I get a lot of parents through the door and they say, I think we want British curriculum, but they don't really fully understand what the British curriculum stands for. So go to different schools, go and experience the different curriculums, because we have so many on offer in Dubai. We're very, very lucky. Speak to the professionals within the schools and make a decision based on what you see, what you hear, and what's right for you, your family, and for your child.
Okay. Amina, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think looking at the curriculum, for us, it's really important that in Dubai we have that
international twist anyway. So I think we're really fortunate. I was talking to a parent just before I came up, talking that we are British curriculum, but actually take the best bits from this curriculum and actually make it work for you. And I think for parents to know that there are different aspects that we're working with to suit their child, that's really important. And I think if they visit the schools, as you were saying, see the different environments. And again, as I was saying before, it's very different from what the parents think the curriculum is like. So actually visiting and seeing the learning and what would suit their child, that's really important. And they can change. You know, I think for parents to feel that they may start and feel like, yes, this is right for my child in early years. Actually, when they're older, I feel this might work. That's okay. You don't have to have your plan set when a child's 1 for the whole of their life. And I think that was really important. I bet a parent had a 1.5-year-old and she said, which one should I choose? And I said, it's okay. Just think now. What do you like now? You know, at this point in your life now, because you can change. It's okay. No one's going to say you can't. I think that's really important.
And that is true. I mean, you know, at that age, really, it's about learning all of those key skills for life, isn't it, really? About developing, you know, the acquisition of, as you said, the importance of reading, you know, of language development, of independence and interpersonal skills. Peter, anything to add to that, though, in terms of, you know, different curriculum models, perhaps, for parents?
I mean, it's a really good question. It tends to be the first question that parents ask when they come on a school tour. You know, why when I choose IB over the British curriculum? And I mean, for us, we always talk about, you know, similar to what you've both said in terms of parents going with what they think is right now for their child. And I mean, for us in our school, it's very much an inquiry-driven, that rich sort of opportunity for students to be practical with their learning, and that suits many of our children. We do underpin that with the early years learning goals. So we sort of talk about how they get the best of both worlds, very much. And parents sort of tend to like to hear that, I think, you know, that sort of approach. But for some, it isn't right. And you know, I think in Dubai, you've got the most wonderful opportunity to explore so many different schools. And if our school isn't necessarily right for them, there will be a school out there which is right for them. And it doesn't necessarily depend upon the curriculum model, particularly at the age of 3. It's whether that environment, that setting feels right for your child.
And there's a key thing that you've all mentioned at one point, and that is the fact that because of the guidance and the regulations from both DHA and KHDA, parents still can visit schools, albeit individually. And I certainly think from our point of view, that's given a far more personal approach in terms of admissions. So, it'll be great if parents are interested in visiting your schools, that they can reach out, and to the other schools that are here with us today and the other schools around the city. And we will guide them and talk them through the school and let them see learning in action, which is probably the most reassuring thing. The final piece of advice then, I guess, to parents, it's a scary time for a parent, isn't it? It sounds wonderful that the child is ready to fly and flap their wings and go off to school and into the unknown. How do parents cope? That it's almost a sense of loss, isn't it? We see it every day. Best piece of advice, just short snippets of advice for parents. Peter, I'll start with you.
Well, as a parent myself, I guess it's different when you're an educator. You know the environment your child's going into.
Yeah.
But for a parent who perhaps isn't used to school, I think just trust in the professionals. Find a school that you feel you can trust the people you're going to be working with, and you can build a really strong communication with, because at least then when you walk away on that first day, and often the parents are in tears and the child goes happily into school, at least you know you've got that level of communication with the person who is going to be there with your child all day. Trust, I think, is trust, and building that really important trust there's nothing more important than that.
Thanks. Amina?
I think for us to cherish the moment, it would only happen once, my oldest is 15 this year, and I think, remembering his very first day of school, I'll remember that forever. And I think for us to celebrate as a milestone, an achievement, rather than think of it as a loss, is really important for parents to just cherish it.
Yeah. Danielle, anything to add? Yeah.
5 minutes for yourself. I mean, this year there's been a lot of talk about well-being for students, teachers, but well-being for parents. Just have 5 minutes where you have a cup of coffee, you sit and read a book, do whatever you enjoy. Try not to worry about your little one that just started school. Trust them, cherish the moment and enjoy it.
I have inside my house, I'm not sure if you've seen it, Amina, I have pictures from my son's first day at preschool, and I have a picture of every year with every class he's been in, right till he finished school last summer. But that picture of the first day of school, as it were, and he looked and smiled and waved at me and turned around and walked in, and I stood there crying thinking, hang on a second, he doesn't love me. Sometimes they're just ready, aren't they? Yeah. They are just ready. And I'm really privileged to have listened to your discussion this morning and your insights as educators about how we can support parents and how we can support children making that transition, making that step into education. On behalf of all of us here at the Schools and Nursery Show, thank you so much to our panel this morning. I think we have one question that might have come in. I'm just double checking because it could be a question and a topic that we haven't yet discovered. But I'm really grateful to Danielle for taking the time to join us this morning. To Amina, I might just have the question popping in over my shoulder. I'm not sure if I do. Let's just see if we have a question. Oh, we do. Okay, and they're great questions, actually. They've disappeared on the photo, but they were good questions. I just got a snippet of that. One of them was to do with, I just glanced at it, it was to do with my child has, for example, speech delay and may face some challenges. How can I support them, and how indeed do schools support young people and children who are coming in? Let me just try and read it again. It says, my son has delayed speech at the age of 3. He is getting therapy, but we're worried about him not being ready for school. I'm considering holding him back. What would you advise? I mean, I'll throw that one on to you.
I think for us, that discussion and to ensure we work in partnership. So if they're already having therapy, to have that relationship with therapists and things that we can do in school as well. And I think, looking at those age-related expectations regarding to speech and language is really important for parents, and to know that we work together. And I think not to put that pressure on the parent and pressure on the child as well, because speech is such an interesting area. We want to give confidence to a child, independence to a child, but we need to give them those tools to succeed, especially in the early years. So if we need to use more visuals to help with their speech, if we need to use more physical language that we can use with our hands to help them support them, we can do that, we can support them. But I think it's getting the advice from the therapist as well, the specialists in their field, the areas that we can work on in school as a triangulation approach. I think that's really important.
I think in fairness to all of our schools, Peter, I'm sure you'd agree that I think, the agenda profile, the inspection framework, the guidance from KHDA, from the other regulatory bodies, we actually have a very good system in this country in terms of how schools work in partnership with parents and specialists to support them. And really, no stone is left unturned. What would your advice be to that mum who's anxious about sending their child to school?
I think, as you've said, already, it's about that dialogue, isn't it? Working with the school, working with any specialists who they're currently working with, and building up that dialogue. It's a supportive environment, as you said, Fiona, that we all work within schools in Dubai. So I think it is very much about that dialogue and listening to people, and again, knowing your child, knowing what you think is right for your child, and again, going back to that trust, trusting in the professionals who are advising you. But yeah, that's essentially
engage
what I would
with
say.
the school.
Yeah.
Open the channels of communication and know that you will be supported on the journey. There was one other question that was there, Danielle, and if I remember it correctly, it was to do with, my child is very comfortable in the home environment. They're quite an insular child. They're not necessarily as comfortable mixing with large groups of children. They're 4. What should I do? Do I send them to school? Do I just do it? What do I do?
Almost rip off the Band-Aid type situation. I think, within early years, we're very, very fortunate that the curriculum is so easily personalised to what children need, whether it's a speech delay, whether it's a confidence difficulty. There are a multitude of different things that we facilitate within our early years environment. And with that particular parent, I would say, go and have a discussion with a number of schools, wherever you think you may want to send your child, and just be open and honest. I really, really appreciate it when parents come through the door, they hold their hands up and they say, I'm really anxious about this, I'm worried about this, I've noticed that my child does this. That honesty and that sort of discussion that you can have with professionals is really, really helpful, not only for the school, but also for your child in the long run. So go to a school, open up and say, I'm really worried they're not so confident when there's strangers around, or they haven't been out of the home environment for such a long time. And there's things that schools can do to help. It might be a specific like transition timetable, it could be a shortened timetable, it could be additional support for a period of time. We can buddy children up. There's lots of things that we can do. And also, your child might surprise you. After a couple of days, they think, actually, this place isn't so bad. It's quite fun here. I'm fine. I'm safe. Yeah. See you, mum. And we see it more often than not. On the first day, the children are crying or the parents are crying. Within a couple of days, it's like they're a different child. So just be confident and go and have professional discussions with teachers and professionals in school.
So I think despite our differences and the different schools that we lead in as educators, I think the messages are clear. Communication. Choose the school and try not to worry parents if at all possible. We know it's an anxious time, more anxious for you actually than it potentially is for your little ones. But on behalf of all of us here at the Schools and Nursery Show this morning, huge and immense thanks to Danielle, to Amina and to Peter for their guidance and their support this morning. And if you've got the time, please do pop along and join us here. We're here for the weekend at the Schools and Nursery Show. We'd love to have these face-to-face conversations. But thank you for joining us this morning.